All right, good morning, Democrats. Welcome to the November election race for district attorney interview process. I'd like to first give a shout out to the chair of the San Francisco Democratic Party, Honey Mahogany, and also to the co-chair of today's endorsement process, Annabelle Ibanez. My name is Gloria Berry, and I want to thank the members who are here to contribute to this endorsement process where we will be interviewing 3 candidates for district attorney. We will today have 2 minutes for introduction from each candidate, and then each candidate will have 15 minutes to have questions from members, and then a 1-minute closing statement. I also want to say hello to our Facebook Live audience and members of the public who've joined in on this webinar call. Other than that, today our timekeeper will be co-chair Ibanez, and I would like to introduce the co-chair for a few words.
Thank you, Co-Chair Berry. I'm Annabelle Ibanez, one of the co-chairs of the endorsement committee, and we want to thank everyone that's here with us today, taking your time, as member Berry indicated, taking your time of this beautiful morning to ensure that we are conducting the interviews for district attorney, and it's an important race for San Francisco. So welcome everyone. And with that, not sure if our one of the candidates that we're interviewing, if he's here.
Yeah, I'm promoting him now.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Welcome, candidate Joe Aliato Veronese. Is that how you pronounce your last name?
Yes, that's close enough. It's Joe Aliotto Veronese, but it's
Veronese. I like. Okay, so welcome and thank you for participating in our process. Today, we will be doing your interview with an opening statement from you, which will consist of 2 minutes. And then we will have 15 minutes for questions from members. And then there will be a 1-minute closing statement. Co-chair Ibanez is the timekeeper, and she will keep you on track. So you ready to get into it?
Yes, let's do it. And I love this format, by the way, because I imagine that most of you had the opportunity to read the extensive questionnaire that you have sent out. So thank you all for doing this today, and this format's great.
Sure. Well, as soon as you're ready, you may begin with your 2-minute introduction. Great.
Well, thank you all for taking the time this morning and being a part of this, obviously, it's important democratic process. I think someone had mentioned earlier that, that this is an important race for San Francisco. This is actually an important race for this nation. I think that the rest of the world is paying attention. They're paying attention certainly to what's happening in San Francisco with the homelessness, with the addiction, with the mental health crisis that's on the street. We just had Salesforce, the conference here, and all of those people are going home to their cities. And they're all wondering, what is San Francisco going to do about this problem? What is San Francisco going to do to drive traffic back into the city? We're one of the very last cities to recover from this pandemic, and everybody's watching. We have a real opportunity in 3 weeks when the ballots drop, and that opportunity is to send the message to the world that not only are we doing something real about criminal justice reform, which I really appreciated that our former DA brought that conversation to the national stage, but what are we actually going to do about the mental health crisis on the street, about the addiction on the street, about the homelessness on the street? What are we doing about the violent crimes that are coming to San Francisco to prey on the Asian community? What are we doing about the fentanyl dealers? These are all questions that people are asking. These are questions that San Franciscans are asking. And I'm a born and raised San Franciscan. And whether or not you're born and raised or you've come here to adopt this amazing city, one of the most beautiful cities in the world, we just need the right leadership. And I'm asking this board, really, they have to take a look at this election I am the best candidate to give criminal justice reform. I'm the best candidate to work with the police department and bring some of those real problems to the forefront and solve some of those real problems. So I'm asking you, if you're serious about criminal justice reform and you're serious about cleaning up this city, please endorse my candidacy, because I'm telling you from day one, the fentanyl dealers, they get arrested. And we do real criminal justice reform. It's our only shot at it. And so thank you for the opportunity in the short time. And I look forward to a robust
Your
question.
time is up. Thank you. We're gonna start. Sorry, I should have told you that my alarm clock was gonna go off. And so when you hear this alarm clock going off, that means it's time.
That
But
alarm clock is alarming, Annabelle.
yes, it is. And that's the reason why, because sometimes we go over and want to make sure. Yeah. Anyway, so thank you so much. And I know that my co-chair Barry is going to open it up for questions, but I just want to make sure we're clear in the process. So when we have 15 minutes of questions and answers, and to ensure that you get the most questions asked, we're going to ask to limit your time. So that way you don't answer one question for like 10 minutes.
I got it. No, got it. I want as many questions. I want a robust session. So let's do
I
it.
guess be precise, and maybe I don't want to put a time limit on the questions, because I also understand the importance of answering those questions. But if you can go around 2 minutes, I'm not going to stop you. But if I feel like you're going over possibly 2, or if you're above 5 minutes, I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to bring you back, just so you know that we want to make sure that everyone here gets an opportunity to ask as many questions, and you be able to answer as all those questions. Yeah, all those questions. So just wanted to make sure that you were clear, and that all of us here in the room were clear in the process.
Great.
So with
Yes.
that, Member Barry.
Thank you, Co-Chair Ibanez. And members, if you have a question, please type the word stack in the chat, and I'm going to go ahead and kick off with a question. Mr. Veronese, is that good?
Veronese.
Veronese.
From the town of Verona is what it means.
Okay, Mr. Veronese, my question is this. When there was this big recall effort against the previous DA, I thought when this appointed DA would be in office, there would be an effort of big change, all this drastic policy, that we would see some type of path to getting things a little bit better in the streets of San Francisco. And one of the policies that recently came out really baffled me, and I wanted to know your take on it. And it's the policy of people using substances, and on the fifth time they use, I guess 5 strikes or something, then they will get arrested and mandatory treatment. And my question for you is, do you see that as a good policy? And also, does the DA even have the authority to give anyone mandatory treatment, or is that the judge's responsibility?
You know, ultimately, most of these deals are done through negotiations, as we know. But let me tell you something. The problem with that policy, and I had a problem with it from the very beginning, from 2 fronts. One, addiction knows no numbers, right? So whether you've been arrested once, twice, 3 times, 30 times, addiction doesn't matter to somebody that's addicted. So it's a ridiculous policy in that way. But the bigger problem is that it sends the message to the police department that, okay, if they see somebody on the street that has a problem, they're going to say, well, that person gets 5 shots at it. Is it this person's first shot? Is it their second shot? Is it their third shot? Is it their 30th shot? What it's going to do is dissuade the police department from doing their job and really getting the mental health and the addiction help that these people need early on. We need to get them their services on their first round. Not that we shouldn't be waiting their 3rd round or 4th round or 5th round. That policy is absolutely ridiculous. And what it does is it gives the Department of Health a pass, and it tells the police officers not to further do their job. So I don't like the policy at all. I think that what you do is you bring that person in. If it's an addiction issue, it shouldn't even be a criminal justice issue. It should be a public health issue. We need to get those people help as soon as possible, because whether or not they overdose once or twice, we're running the risk that they're going to kill themselves, and we need to get them help. These people are somebody's brothers, sisters, mothers. We got to get them the help, and we can't stop. We got to stop stepping over them. And that's how I feel about it. I think this policy is ridiculous. She's passing off her responsibilities.
Okay, and did you answer if the DA has the sole authority to do mandatory?
No, there's no sole authority. Everybody has due process rights. So the DA has the ability to charge somebody and ultimately negotiate some sort of plea deal, or if they get a guilty plea deal, then negotiate, some sort of sentence or restitution or whatever penalty is going to be there. But addiction is not a criminal issue. We've got to stop criminalizing it, and we've got to get the Department of Health to work on this. We really do. And it's not just a city issue; it's a statewide issue. It's a national issue. We've got to get help from the feds. Now that we've got a Democratic president, we got a Democratic governor, we need to bring those resources back to San Francisco, because we just can't handle it. And we're seeing that on the streets today.
Thank you so much. And next I see Treasurer Morales has a question.
Thank you, Gloria.
Thank you, Member Barry. Hi, Joe Veronese. My question is in connection to immigration. And I know, we're not the same people as our parents, and yet, that's a strong connection many times, particularly if we are close to our parents. And your mother, a few years ago, supported and actually proposed an ordinance, legislation, a ballot measure to decrease the power and the strength of sanctuary city in San Francisco. And I think it's very pertinent to discuss this, particularly because so many of the allegations against quote unquote drug dealers or people who allegedly are selling drugs are actually against young immigrants who are under 25, many of whom are actually under 18 years old, do not know any English, and come here and actually are getting manipulated and exploited by larger organizations. And yet we are going after these young people who are immigrants. So one, what is your position around sanctuary city? And two, what are you going to do to really kind of understand the nuance of what's happening in the Tenderloin in particular with immigrant young people who are involved in the drug market?
Absolutely. Thank you, Ms. Morales. I am not my mother. I am a very different person. I have her compassion, but I am a very different person. I come from a different place. I know the Tenderloin well. I worked in the Tenderloin for 5 years. And we were, so I know the neighborhood very well. I know the issue very well. I'm very sympathetic to the fact that we have people that are dealing drugs on the streets that are immigrants, and there are pressures that are going on there. There are cartel pressures. There are all sorts of issues. But what we need to do is we need to make sure that we climb up that ladder, right? Because it's not the street level people that are that are the entire problem. We need to make our way all the way up to the cartels. We need to find out, stem the influx of this dangerous drug that's killing hundreds of people every year. Just the other day, 3 people on one block. We have to stop this, but we have to start by bringing in those people that are on the street and working our way up the ladder to figure out where it's coming from. And yes, do we need to work with the federal government on this? In this particular instance, I think we do. But let me make something very clear. We do not enforce immigration policy in San Francisco. That is not the job of the district attorney. Our job is to keep people safe in San Francisco and to stem the deaths that are happening because of this awful fentanyl crisis that we're having. We have to get to the bottom of it, and we got to start at the street level and work our way up. So I hope I've answered your question. Do I believe in sanctuary city? Absolutely, 100%. By the way, my mother, Angela, was the author of the sanctuary city law. She was a pioneer when it came to this law, and I have defended this law over and over in my talks. So I absolutely believe in it. And you know what? Just because I'm a 5th generation San Francisco on one side of my family, a lot of people don't know this. My father came here when he was 26 years old. He was an immigrant. I'm a 1st generation San Franciscan on my father's side. He barely spoke any English. Not a lot of people know that about him because he died so young. He died at the age of 49 when I was 19 years old. But so I understand the issue, and San Francisco is a city of immigrants. We have to celebrate that. We absolutely have to.
Thank you, Treasurer Morales, and thank you for that answer. Next, I see Member Maliga.
Thank you, Member Barry. Joe, nice to meet you, man. Thank you for sharing your time with us today. As another San Francisco native I've been here since early 80s. And, my question to you is really around the high homicide rate that we've been seeing in the city around gun violence, right? That has plagued, Black and Brown communities. People don't talk about it, but you've been here your entire life and you've heard the stories from the Southeast all the way to the Mission, right? And so, as a DA, what is your take on how to address that issue, in addition to working with, the partners, the police department, the public defenders, to really start to bring some real solutions to mitigating these issues. I lost a niece last year to, she was killed, and they're still looking for the shooter. I lost a cousin up in Hunters Point, and they're still, and so I asked you that question humbly. What's your take on that? Right? It's an issue that people don't really talk about, but I know you're probably familiar with it.
This is such a hard issue. Losing a life in San Francisco to a gun is absolutely unacceptable. There's no place for guns in an urban city like ours. There just isn't. And so we have to get as many guns off the streets as possible. I was on the board of directors years ago of the Omega Boys Club, which was one of these programs that tried to get these at-risk kids into after-school programs. And we paid for college, and we actually got them into college and paid for college. We need to celebrate those types of programs. They need to be part of a partnership with the DA's office. We have to have call-ins. We have to bring in the at-risk youth, make sure that they're getting the jobs. That's what criminal justice reform is really about. And we have to make sure that the system is not oppressing people of color, which it absolutely does, right? Cash bail could not be more discriminatory. I've been a civil rights lawyer for 22 years. You've got civil assessments. You've got no-knock bails that have been killing young Black kids around this country. Why the police commission isn't abolishing no-knock warrants is incredible. I need to work. The most important thing that you said is that we need to work with all of these constituencies, right? We need to bring them all in and make them part of the solution. And that's the only way it's going to work, is if you elect a DA that understands the different neighborhoods in the city, that understands the constituencies. This is not an issue of left versus right. And people ask me, oh, are you left or are you right? I'm not left or I'm right. I'm right and wrong. It's very clear on issues like this that we have to protect our kids and give them the right opportunities. And our school system, we absolutely need to fix our school system. It's underfunded. The teachers are underpaid. We need to really invest in San Francisco, but we can do it if we all work together and make sure that we're not all fighting over what we disagree on, because all of us can agree that this needs a solution, and we need to bring together constituencies, the important constituencies in San Francisco, and not fight with them on this issue. People are dying, like you said, and it breaks my heart that you have a family member that was a part of that.
Thank you for that question, Member Maliga. Next in stack, I see Vice Chair Galata.
Thank you, Co-Chair Barry. I have kind of a two-part question for you, Mr. Veronese. Thank you for being here. So I wanted to follow up on a question in our questionnaire regarding donations from police officers and law enforcement organizations like Police Officers Association. I believe you indicated that you are not seeking an endorsement from the POA. My question is, will you publicly commit to not take money from the POA and other law enforcement entities and individuals in this race?
Absolutely. So you all should know that when I was a fire commissioner in San Francisco, I saw that mental health was impacting our first responders. They were killing themselves. You don't read about it. So I started a foundation called the National First Responders Fund, and we raise a bunch of money, and all of that money goes to prevent first responders, firefighters, dispatchers, police officers from killing themselves because of the things that they see on a daily basis. So as we are in 336 departments around the country in 36 different states. So when I decided to run for district attorney, all of those departments came to me and said, hey, I want to support you. We want to send you money. And I said, listen, I'm not going to accept that. I can't accept that. I know you believe that I will support first responders, especially when it comes to mental health issues, but I'm not going to take your money, because what it does is it gives the perception that I'm taking sides, and I absolutely do not take sides on this issue. Bad police officers need to be prosecuted 100%. When I was on the police commission, we started criminal justice reform. It's why our department is one of the most diverse departments in the world. And I'm very proud about that, but there's still a lot of work to be done. And we've got to stop fighting over what we disagree with at the police commission and in other areas. We got to work to make our cities safer and to make sure that our police department has the rules to actually serve the people of San Francisco in the way that they expect it. We're slowly making our way there through attrition and weeding out the bad cops through hiring new cops. We've been doing that since I was on the police commission in 2008, and since I was in the police department early on years in my early years as a volunteer for the department. So I hope I answered your question, but absolutely, there was a weird question for me because I have donations coming in every day, and I don't necessarily check to see if somebody was a retired police officer if they say they're retired and not working. So that's why I wanted to be as honest as possible about that question. But from the organizations, absolutely not. Although they have reached out, I have told them I'm not interested in there. When I become district attorney, I need to be very clear to the public, and perception is important. I am on the side of the people of San Francisco. I am not on the side of police officers.
Thank you. Thank you for that question, Vice Chair Galata. And next I see Member Avalos.
Good morning, Supervisor.
Good morning. Just want to make sure I'm not on mute. Okay, good morning. My question's related to campaign finance laws and the role of the DA's office. So it is the responsibility of the San Francisco DA's office to enforce local campaign finance and disclosure laws. What is your position on the appropriateness and legality of a politically interested individual, organization, or donor to arrange consulting work using C3 funds to ensure key C3 staffers can work and appear to be volunteers on electoral campaigns they are supporting through the C3? What kind of reporting and record keeping would your office require for C3 and C4 related campaigns to retain in order to demonstrate a firewall between these nonprofit paid work and related C4 campaign committee volunteer activities with clear electoral goals? How will your office bring clarity so that the public can have confidence that there is a clear separation of these activities?
Supervisor, thank you for that question. And let me make it clear. I am fighting that fight right now in this campaign. I see it every day. I'm running against an interim district attorney that was accused of doing this exact thing. The legislature in San Francisco and the Ethics Commission has been constantly looking for ways to kind of to bridge these gaps, to fill these gaps that keep popping up. This is a loophole. If you're a billionaire, you can put $1 million into an account and put 10 staffers together to go work on a campaign. I'm fighting that today in my race. And certainly Boudin, Chesa fought that in his race. And the problem is we don't see that until after the election's over, right? And in people's disclosure statements, but it's happening right now, and it's dirty politics. And we need to make sure that we legislate around it. And when it is appropriate, we need to prosecute for it. We have to send the signal that nonsense is not, there's no place for that in San Francisco politics. It's here today in this race. I am telling you, I see it every day, and it makes me sick.
What kind of record keeping would you want to see that would actually help the DA's office to enforce this law?
Well, I think
close this loophole.
Yeah, I think in San Francisco, the best way to close that loophole is to make sure that nonprofits that are active in San Francisco, and we know that there are a lot of nonprofits over the last 2 years have gotten $1 billion, but even the ones that haven't gotten city money, that nonprofits that have anything to do with politics, that there is a mechanism there for the Ethics Commission to go in and conduct their investigations, and also when appropriate for the district attorney in criminal matters to go in and do similar investigations, because otherwise they're just totally off the books. And we need to catch that and make sure that The disclosures are there so that we can all be clear about who we're running against. Because if I'm having to raise $500 at a time and call thousands and thousands of people in order to come up with, $500,000 or $250,000, and some billionaire puts $1 million into a nonprofit, it makes the $500 threshold absolutely useless. And we've got to make sure, and there's a good reason for it. But right now, it is honestly, there's no reason for it because of this loophole and all of the money in San Francisco politics and everything that is at stake. So we have to hold people accountable. We've got to make examples out of people that actually break the laws. And we got to have better reporting on the issue of nonprofits in San Francisco, because currently that seems to be a huge gap.
Thank you.
Thank you, Member Avalos. I don't see any more questions in the stack. I do have another question I see a hand. Member Baraka.
Hi, candidate Veronese. My question has to do with the support or opposed questions. The question that I have specifically has to do around your answer on tasers. You left some room for equivocation. I wanted you to opportunity to explain.
Yeah, listen, I hate tasers. But what we need to do as police officers, as a police commission and a DA's office, I want more oversight of the police department, no question about it. But when you look at the use of force continuum, and I understood this issue because I studied it as a police commissioner. I served 4 years as a police commissioner. You have physical presence all the way up to the most fatal use of force, which is the use of a weapon, right? And in between, you've got batons and you've got certain holds, right? The bar arm hold has been abolished. So what we have to do is, this question is about giving police officers the tools that they need to protect the public. And part of those tools is training, right? Mental health training is critical. We've had too many people in the United States killed by police officers because they just don't understand the issue of mental health. You've got somebody wielding a knife who is going through a mental health crisis, and that police officer shows up, and their training tells them, when you see somebody with a knife, you're in danger and you can use fatal force. We need to have better training around that. And so we need to make sure that our officers have the tools necessary to meet the threat, if there is even a threat, or to fully understand the threat that exists there. So when I saw this whole debate about tasers, it's like, okay, you don't want to give a police officer tasers, but let's rationalize this. If you don't give them the tasers, then their next use of force is a firearm. We know that's fatal force. We need to find alternative methods to give people or police officers the ability to control certain levels of force at that level that they're meeting it. And currently, I think our police commission is having a real problem with this. And it's causing serious morale issues, because police officers, when they go to work, they want the tools to keep themselves safe, right? But they also want to keep the tools to keep the public safe. And when their next tool or their next use of force is a firearm, that's a failure for everybody, because then somebody dies. And that is horrible. And when the training is teaching them to use the firearm, that just means that we're failing our police department and our people, because we're not giving them the necessary tools. But as far as tasers are concerned, I absolutely hate tasers. I've been tasered before. I think they're awful. They affect people with heart issues. And frankly, it's horrible. It's a horrible thing for police.
Not to cut you off.
The way it looks too. It's a horrible use of force.
I hear you. It sounds like, and please correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like you're not necessarily in favor of tasers, but you're in favor of less than lethal options, and that officers should be trained on those less than lethal options and execute those as trained.
Absolutely. We need to be robust about our training in our police officers. And it's got to be at that level that the public expects, right? So that when the public sees a police officer and they think, oh, well, that's an overuse of force, and that police officer is doing what they're trained to do, we need to make sure that that level of expectation for the public as well as the police officer is at a commensurate level, because we can't have police officers, using a use of force to the public and to everybody else is not commensurate.
Thank you.
It's bad for morale. It's bad for the department, and it's frankly, it makes you unproud of your police department. We can't be unproud of our police department. These are hardworking people that do a very important job, and we just need to make sure that they get the right training. And you know what, Keith? You know what that may mean? That may mean that they have to take extra risks. In other words, they have to combat a certain level of force with non-lethal force, where in the past it would have been lethal force. And you know what? A police officer has to make that decision. If they want to go to work for a police department that has this policy, they have to make that decision. But the city and the police commission, who I intend on working with, has to come up with a commensurate level of the use of force continuum that is the expectation of the public, frankly.
Thank you so much. Time is up for the questions. And I just want to make sure that everyone understands what we're doing is that anytime anyone asks a question, we stop the clock and then give you your full 15 minutes so you can answer the question. So just in case someone said, oh, we're giving candidate Veronese more time, we're not. Every time anyone asks a question, we stop the clock. So you had your 15 minutes. With that, Member Barry.
Thank you, members, for all the great questions. Mr. Veronese, you now have 1 minute for a closing statement.
Thank you, Gloria. Ladies and gentlemen of the Democratic Party, we have to take back our city, and we have to do it in a way that empowers us all, that makes us proud. We have the most beautiful city in the world. We do. Geographically, we're the most beautiful city in the world. And it's up to all of us to work together to bring that back. That's not going to happen under this district attorney. It'll happen the moment I get sworn into office. I will be inclusive about my efforts, and I will make sure that public safety is the most important thing that we do, right next to criminal justice reform. It absolutely has to happen. I've been a civil rights attorney for the last 22 years representing workers. And I will continue that fight as your district attorney in a very inclusive way. I'm a proud San Franciscan. I am so proud that I jumped into this race because I want to deliver a 21st century criminal justice system for my kid to walk these streets so that your kids could walk these streets and be proud of where they live. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Please, I need your endorsement because I know I can win this race. And when I win this race, we're going to deliver a 21st century San Francisco that we can all be proud of. So thank you very much. I have swept the union endorsements because the workers of San Francisco, know that I'm going to deliver for them, and I will work hard with them
You need to wrap it up. We're done. 1 minute's up.
Thank you, Annabelle.
Thank you so much for being here with us today. And as you know, on Wednesday, September 28th is where we will be making a decision on who we will be endorsing. And once again, thank you for joining us.
Thank you all for your efforts, and have a great weekend.
Okay, next up, our next candidate, Executive Director Garcia. Is she here?
It's actually going to be John next, and he's peeling away from a mobilization event.
All right. So again, I just want to thank everyone for coming today. Today, the San Francisco Democratic Party Endorsement Committee meeting is conducting interviews for district attorney. I'm restating this for those who may have just joined us. We have 3 candidates today. Each candidate will be given 2 minutes for introduction, 15 minutes for questions from members. We are stopping the clock when the member asks their question, so that time is not taken from the candidate. And then there will be a 1 minute closing statement. Our next candidate is John Hamasaki. We're waiting on him to join us as we speak. Appreciate everyone spending their Saturday with us. Shout out to our Facebook Live crew and anyone else who's joined as an attendee on this Zoom call today. Executive Director Garcia, is Brooke Jenkins here even though she's going to go last?
She's not.
Okay. All right. Did anybody have any questions or anything they wanted to point out about the process? I can add that we have the actual vote will be Wednesday night at 6:30 p.m. All members of the public are welcome to attend as well as make public comment in regards to this race or any matter on the agenda or going on in San Francisco, Democratic matters. And yeah, so did anybody have any announcements or anything? Peter Galata, how's the Turn Blue campaign going?
Keep it blue.
Yeah, keep it blue.
It's going. There's actually people phone banking as we speak. So there's phone banks every Saturday, Sunday, and Wednesday evenings. So I'll share a little bit more on Wednesday night, more info with folks, but definitely would love Democrats to help us turn out and make calls in the next few weeks. It's really go time. This is key. We've only got 6 weeks left, if that, to the election. So we're calling into the Central Valley, into Arizona, and into Nevada. So these are all key districts and races. And actually, just from my experience making calls, and I think Moises can maybe agree with this, is it's been positive in terms of I've gotten a lot of response and yes, commitments from voters to vote Democrat. So it feels good, and it's good that we're confirming we got to turn our folks out. We know it's going to come all down to turnout. So I'll drop a link into the chat if folks would like to sign up for a phone bank in the coming weeks. And visit sfdemocrats.org as well for those who are watching for more info on our phone banks.
Executive Director, do we need like a 5-minute recess to give time to?
No, Mr. Hamasaki is on now.
Okay, perfect.
I'm sorry, give me 1 second. I was told I was at 11:50, so my apologies.
Take your time. It's okay.
I just walked in the door. Okay.
While we're waiting, also, I just put it out there. We have one more meeting next month for the 2022 year. And then we'll have a recess in November and December and back on it in January. Ballots are coming out next month in the mail, and election day is November 8th. So please, please, please check to see if you're registered at the correct address. If you moved, that would be great. And I see we have our next candidate in the Zoom, Mr. John Hamasaki. Welcome. Thank you so much for participating in this process. We are going to give you 2 minutes for introduction, and then members will ask questions. That's going to be a 15-minute process. When the member asks a question, that time will not be held or taken from you. You will have your full 15 minutes to speak, and then 1 minute for closing statement. So again, thank you. And when you are ready, go ahead with your 2-minute introduction.
Can I just say one more thing before, just to make sure that we're clear on process? If we need more time for, so one of the things that we're asking all candidates is to ensure that you answer your questions precisely, and if possible, less than 2 minutes. We're not keeping time in terms of how much time you have in your questions to answer, but we want to make sure that everyone gets an opportunity to ask you your questions, and that we can use those 15 minutes. But if for whatever reasons there are more questions that members have and your time went up, we may possibly extend the time. But I just want to make sure that we're clear in this process. So thank you.
Thank you. Should I get started?
Yeah, and just so you're clear that Co-Chair Ibanez is the timekeeper, so she'll keep you on track. So okay, yes, please get started.
I'll try to move fast. Good morning, afternoon. My name is John Hamasaki. Again, I'm running for the District Attorney of San Francisco. Right now, our city is in a crisis of mismanagement and corruption led by a single administration. that has control over nearly every aspect of city government. Homelessness, crime, drug abuse, and mental health challenges have increased while our economy has faltered. This is why we need an independent district attorney unafraid to tackle the difficult issues facing our city and take on the people in power, putting their own interests ahead of our own. As an independent district attorney, I will answer only to the people of San Francisco. When elected, public safety will be my #1 priority, but safety cannot exist without justice. I will bring justice to those stealing wages from working people, to those selling influence in City Hall. We can do justice by helping everyone in the criminal justice system succeed, from supporting victims' rights, while ensuring that offenders are given a chance at rehabilitation through job training, drug treatment, mental health counseling, and other proven ways to reduce crime. We can end the cycle of crime and recidivism by giving offenders the
John?
chance to become.
If you can wrap it up, your time is up.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you for the intro, and I will jump into questions now.
Thank you so much. Next, we have the 15-minute question period. The first member with a question is Member Avalos.
Good morning.
Morning.
This is related to campaign finance laws. It is the responsibility of the San Francisco District Attorney's Office to enforce local campaign finance and disclosure laws. What is your position on the appropriateness and legality of a politically interested individual, organization, or donor to arrange consulting work using C3 funds to ensure key C3 staffers can work and appear to be volunteers on electoral campaigns they are supporting through the C3? What kind of reporting and record keeping would your office want to see in the C3, C4 related campaigns to demonstrate a firewall between nonprofit paid work and related C4 campaign volunteer activities? How will your office bring clarity so that the public can have confidence that there is a clear separation between these activities?
Right. So that's been a complicated issue in this election cycle. I really think that it harms the voters' confidence in the clarity and legality and credibility of our system when individuals are allowed to blur the line between C3 and C4 activities. So, I think it's important to hold people accountable for the really the credibility of the system. If people are allowed to take funds that are meant for non-political purposes and use them for purely political purposes, that undermines our democracy and our free and fair elections. And that is something absolutely I would enforce, require the appropriate paperwork and disclosures, and prosecute where appropriate.
Thank you.
Thank you, Member Avalos. Next, we have Treasurer Morales.
Thank you, Member Barry. Hello, John Masaki.
Hello.
Welcome. My question is in regards to immigration, and it's a two-part question. So one is, it's very important for me as somebody who has worked in anti-violence for over a decade and in policy work for close to 20 years, that we continue to protect and strengthen our sanctuary city status in San Francisco. And there have been a lot of conversations with the interim DA about the young men and women who are allegedly engaged in drug sales in the Tenderloin, who are majority immigrant and very young, under 25 years old, many of them under 18 years old, so actual children. And we also have the reality that these young people don't speak any English, don't really understand the system, and are recent arrivals, right? So they're very vulnerable to exploitation by larger enterprises. So I want to know what's your position around immigration, around Sanctuary City, and around understanding the nuance of the involvement of immigrants, particularly in this issue of drug sales in our city.
Okay, so first of all, this is an issue that I've worked on for my whole career. I've represented immigrants through criminal processes and in post-conviction matters. And I think I can say that in my career, I've never taken a plea that would result in someone's deportation. As district attorney, just yesterday, Gavin Newsom signed, I think it's 2195, that allows prosecutors to, instead of convicting somebody for a deportable offense, give an offense of, I think, public nuisance that has the same consequences as the drug crime that would become deportable. So that's a tool I would use. I would use other tools to, where there are appropriate plea negotiations and plea bargains, to ensure that people don't become deportable from ending up in the criminal justice system. I've worked on a matter that was pretty well known all the way up to the governor's desk, and received a pardon for an individual that had been involved in actually a violent crime in his youth, but had come from Cambodia when he was 3. And so they were trying to deport him back to a country where he didn't even speak the language. And so we fought that. That was with Asian Law Caucus, all the way up to the governor's desk, and obtained a pardon for him. He's an excellent member of society. This was in the Chronicle, in a lot of media coverage. Oh, Trump tweeted about it. He was so mad, this particular case. So, this has been an important work for my career, and work that I think I can continue as a prosecutor, which is to keep people immigration safe, while ensuring that accountability is achieved.
Thank you so much for your answer. Next, we have Vice Chair Galata.
Thanks, Co-Chair Berry. Hi, John. Thanks so much for being here. So I'm asking all the candidates this question, which is a follow-up question on our questionnaire regarding donations from police officers and law enforcement organizations. And it's really kind of a two-part question. So one, just to get candidates on the record, will you publicly commit to not take money from the POA and other law enforcement entities in this race? And then if elected, how do you plan to hold law enforcement accountable, particularly police, in cases where there is clear evidence of officer misconduct or excessive force?
So yes, I will not take any donations from the POA or any other law enforcement groups. As a candidate, yes, I just absolutely not. As prosecutor, I think historically, there's been two systems of justice, one for everybody else and one for the police. And what that's done is really harm the relations between police and the community when the community sees police engaged in violence, in officer-involved police shootings. People are actually killed and the police aren't held accountable. And so, when you go to the community that are heavily policed, they're wondering why they're so policed, and the police that do crimes, do misconduct, are getting away with it. And prosecutors have helped with that. Prosecutors have literally covered up crimes for police. And we just can't tolerate that. For 4 years, I served on the police commission, doing civilian oversight, but we also set the rules that the police had to follow. And if they violated the rules, myself and my other commissioners, we sit in a quasi-judicial capacity, which means we're like judges. We take evidence, we have the formal hearings, and we come to decisions based on the evidence. So, I've done police discipline for 4 years. I've seen, some really bad things. And that really tarnishes the image of law enforcement and the good officers that are out there trying to do their job, trying to make the city safer. And they have these bad actors over here that really, one scandal, which we've had a lot of in San Francisco, really, impacts the police that are trying to do their jobs and the city's trust of their police. So I will absolutely hold them accountable, just like everybody else.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hamasaki. I have a question for you. The previous DA, I noticed a lot when the recallers were out there, the issue of Asian hate was one of their talking points. And a lot of the Asian community felt hate crime should be charged on some crimes here in San Francisco. And then recently I saw an interview with our current DA that stated that the difficulty in charging a hate crime, and it's amazing that the predecessor was accused of not doing it, but now we see why it's really not that easy. Can you speak on what you intend to do to have the Asian community feel safer, specifically the elders, who I think it's disgusting on what been happening to them, but what do you see as a solution in the role of DA, and also just the charge of a hate crime?
Yeah, I mean, this is a pretty personal issue to me. I probably ended up in San Francisco, or I did, because I thought it was like this beacon of Asian society and culture. I grew up in Miami, in an area that was 90-some% white. There was 4 Asian kids in my elementary school. I got bullied, beaten up, chased down, and eventually kind of fought back. But it's a traumatic thing to feel like when you walk out of your house, you might be a target for a crime just because of the color of your skin or your identity, or anything that people may target you for. I'll say, in my early 20s, I was the victim of a pretty bad, violent anti-Asian attack by 3 men with a bat yelling Asian slurs. The police didn't respond well. Other police later actually arrested the guy. And I went through the system, and when we're all talking about all of this and how Asian victims are not feeling supported by the system, I know what that feels like. When victim services aren't stepping up and providing culturally competent, trauma-informed services, most of the time all you get is a letter in the mail or a phone call saying, come to court because we need you to testify, we need you to become a witness. And it hasn't really looked at that attack in my early 20s changed me for years. Like, it made me a different person. It made me not trust the police. It made me not trust, being outside. And so, when I see this happening in San Francisco, of all places, which should be a safe place for Asian Americans, we just have such a rich history here that it's hard to see. And it's especially hard to see with our elders. My 93-year-old dad, they come out here every summer and stay in Corte Madera. And he asked me, is it safe to come into San Francisco? I saw this on the news, even in Miami. And, I said, yeah, I think it is, but there's also, real danger. As district attorney, one, you can hold people accountable when there are hate crimes, but you have to follow the law and do it in a thoughtful and, by the law. You can't charge somebody for a hate crime where it's not motivated by bias, gender, race, or other characteristics. And the way it was used in the in the campaign, I thought was really in the recall campaign, I thought was really, I felt like we were being used as props for political causes, and that did not feel good, because it was taking the very real pain of a community and using it for political ends. And then, the interim district attorney gets in office, and there's another horrible attack on an Asian elder. And then she says, well, no, you can't charge him in every case, like I was saying on the campaign trail. I think she's right about that. But the problem is she was saying it the other way for almost a year to try to recall the district attorney. As a prosecutor, as a leader, I think it's important to be out in the community. You can't just sit up in the office and go to press conferences, but you have to get out in the Asian American community and all communities and let people know that you're there for them, that you'll provide services when these terrible things happen, and that you'll make sure the laws are enforced accordingly, and they'll be supportive of going through the process. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you for sharing your experience being an Asian man. Whew. Next on stack is, I believe, Member Lovett.
Thank you, Co-Chair Barry. So my question is with regard to the appointed DA's new policy around citations for drug use and possession of paraphernalia. What is your take on that policy? Because it's certainly not saying that people will be necessarily jailed at that 5th citation, and they are supposed to be going to a community justice center. How would you take on that plan, or how would you do things differently to address, the very real issues that we are seeing on the streets? But clearly this is going after people on the streets.
Yeah, I mean, this is such a tough issue for San Francisco. And, as a long 28-year San Franciscan, as a dad of an 8-year-old kid, it frankly, sucks to see people, on the street struggling with addiction. And, you have to feel compassion for them. And we have 50 years of a drug war that have absolutely failed to address addiction, to address, we have more fentanyl than ever on our streets, even though we have ramped up the drug war in San Francisco. Nationwide, the Biden administration has refocused things to also focus on harm reduction. And I think that's really what we need. You can say, we're going to get tough on drug users for having legal paraphernalia. I don't understand that, because in San Francisco, it's legal to possess certain types of paraphernalia. I understand wanting to do something about it, but it's a public health issue, not a criminal justice issue. We need, there's nothing in the interim DA's plan that provides more treatment beds. And, we've heard it from one of the judges of the Superior Court who oversees this. There's simply not enough treatment beds. And there's not, so somebody say, you get somebody to Community Justice Court or CJC, where I used to practice, I'm familiar with it. The judge in there right now really tries to do good work and help people. But, if you can't offer people treatment beds, it's just a matter of showing up every few weeks. If they're being drug tested, the plan includes that if they have that 5th citation, they'll actually have 5 cases filed against them. So it is a criminal process at that point. It's not how it's being sold as a compassionate alternative. It's criminalizing addiction. We could also start by housing people on the street. I think there's a lot of people in the city using drugs, but they're doing it behind their closed doors. And, that's less upsetting to people. But yeah, I don't support the criminalization of drugs at all. Of drug use. We could definitely do without the drug sales on our streets, and I intend to enforce the law there. But, the use, you've got to give people the treatment options and help them get better.
Thank you, Mr. Hamasaki. Next, we have Vice Chair Baraka.
Hello, candidate Hamasaki. My question has to do with, in some ways, artificial intelligence and its role in the courts. It's my understanding that an algorithm sometimes is used in determining whether or not someone should be released based on community safety. But I've also understood that certain algorithms aren't necessarily fair to communities of color. What is your knowledge of the use of artificial intelligence or algorithms in our courts? And do you think that they are used in a way that's fair to all?
Yeah, so I have a pretty strong technology background in my legal work. I've represented the hacktivist group Anonymous. I've was the only case excluding ShotSpotter from a criminal court. So I've worked heavily with algorithms, and an algorithm is just a formula. It's just a set of data points that equal up or add up or reach a conclusion that, you know, in the case of the pretrial release software that's been used, that if they have, you know, X, Y, and Z factors, that they are at a high risk of reoffending and causing harm. The problem is a lot of these, the data points that they use are also tied to racially discriminatory policing. And what it does is it keeps the cycle of our racially disparate criminal justice system. It maintains the cycle instead of changing it. You know, do I think there's a use for algorithms of any type? I haven't seen the ones that have been shown to not have racial biases programmed into them. And I follow this issue pretty closely. And so, you know, at the system we have right now, it's not a perfect system, but I'd rather trust a judge looking at the individual in court, hearing from people around him, and making a decision based on, you know, things that don't fall within the algorithm, things about a real person who's had real struggles and real challenges, and how to help them and help the community have safety.
So it is used, but do you feel that improvement is needed, or is it more like a hybrid effect between using that algorithm and using some of the things that you mentioned about what the judge?
Right. So to be honest, I'm not sure of the exact software that is used, and so I don't have specific criticisms of it. What I'll say is that I've followed this issue very closely nationally, and from my understanding, all of the ones I've seen written about contain biases. So I don't support their use at this time. If there's a way to eliminate bias from it and it achieves a better, fairer, more just response, I would consider it. But right now, I'd rather put my faith in a human being to make that decision rather than an algorithm that I know there's been fights to actually release the actual algorithm so people can challenge it and say, here's the problem with it. I don't think that's been done. They keep it as a trade secret. But yes, I don't support the use of them now.
Thank you.
Thank you. And one more, time is up. However, Mr. Hamasaki, I would like to know if you would be willing to entertain one more question for privilege of the co-chair of this committee, Annabelle Ibanez, or if you need to go.
No, I'm fine. Thank you.
I'm not sure if everyone was able to ask their questions who were on staff.
Yes, they were.
Oh, they did. Okay. So I actually wanted to ask a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Member Malika.
So we have several members, and I actually, into this, I would actually like to expand this, if we can ask. So besides Member Malika and myself, how many other members have questions that were not able to answer their questions? If not, I would like to propose to expand to 10 minutes. If possible.
Is that a motion you're going to make?
I'm making a motion. I would like to make a motion to expand to expand this interview to 10 more minutes.
I second.
So moved.
So it's been second and moved.
Need to vote?
Yeah, can we vote? Do we just, if you're in favor, please say aye.
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 If you're opposed, say nay. Abstained? So motion carries, so we have 10 more minutes for this interview. Thank you.
Okay, and I apologize, Member Malika was actually in staff, and then co-chair Ibanez.
No problem, Member Barry. You've been doing a great job running these endorsement meetings, and just so much to keep up. So I appreciate that. I also appreciate Member Banya's with the motion. So, hey, John, good afternoon. I appreciate you also, coming in a little bit early. I know you're ripping and running out there. My question was around the Innocence Commission, and I read your comments, and I just kind of wanted to like get your take on like wrongful convictions, period, right? Like, why are these happening? I grew up in this city, right? And so been pulled over by the cops, right? I had friends who've been like, planted, drugs, the whole shebang, right? And so like for me, it's like, why is it happening? I see what folks are doing, and why do you think it's happening? And how do we continue to like, begin to mitigate this issue?
Yeah, that's actually a great question, because it's hard, because I think there's been a historical belief by some police that if they think somebody's a bad guy, it's okay to, cheat a little bit around the edges because they're a bad dude, and we may not have the gun this time, we may not have the dope next time. So, let's try to get them locked up based on, false testimony, planted evidence. I've seen witnesses coerced with threats of jail, and so people are saying, no, I don't have any information. Police are saying, look, you have this other case, I can make it go away, or you can go to jail. What does somebody do, right? I mean, hopefully somebody does the right thing, but the reality is there's been a long history, and the problem with prosecutors' offices is they haven't done the independent investigation on their own, and they haven't challenged the evidence that's in front of them, or the police, right? Because the police and prosecutors are often work together all the time. They build close relationships. They date and marry. I mean, that's, they socialize together. Right? It happens all the time. And so they have biases that they need to recognize, and they have like the primary job of a prosecutor is to do justice. But if you're asking a prosecutor if they're willing to do justice, the question for a prosecutor is, have you ever reported misconduct? Have you ever called out a police officer for doing wrong? And I think in the case of most prosecutors, they've looked the other way, or they haven't, they've said, this looks a little bit funky, but I'm not going to dig too deep because it might mess up my good case. This is, an important case. It's a serious case, so it's okay to move around the margins. But, as you said, that's what leads to wrongful convictions, and that's the most serious thing outside of taking a life, is taking somebody's liberty, putting somebody into a prison cell when they didn't do what they're accused of have done. And so, as prosecutors, doing justice has to mean not doing injustice. It has to mean not allowing police to bring you bad cases, to cheat, to, there's this term that I learned early on in my legal career, which is testifying, basically testifying and lying, that people believe is maybe not a constant from police, but it's a real reality. Police are trained to testify, and they make really good witnesses. They often come in their uniforms, and they're very, believable. But if they're being believable while not telling the truth, you have a jury convict an innocent person. So I think it's the prosecutor's duty to keep police in check on this. I think it's prosecutor's duty to really challenge the cases that are brought, and make sure that they're only prosecuting people that are guilty beyond a reasonable doubt.
Thank you, Mr. Hamasaki. And our last question will be from Co-Chair Ibanez.
Yeah, I'm an educator, and I have worked with many of my colleagues and many people around this country in terms of stopping the education to prison pipeline. And one of the things that the current interim DA is establishing policies to criminalize, to basically charge young adults as, as adults. And research has shown that actually those strategies have not worked. It's actually a lot more harmful to those who have been tried as adults. Specifically, Black and Brown youth are the ones who carry the brunt. Can you tell me more, if you were to be elected, one, how would you work to ensure that you could overturn this policy and ensure that our youth who are charged with crimes, how do we help them so they don't continue committing those crimes? So that's one. And two, in terms of how do you work with the school district to end this prison pipeline?
Yeah, that's a really important point. I'll tell a little story. I think this is the first time I'm telling it in the process, but coming up the way I did and being victimized since a little kid, I kind of ended up being a kid that was getting in trouble later in my teens and high school, and I started running around with some kids, and I saw this happen firsthand. I had a friend. This is Miami, and things could be a little bit crazier down there. But I had a friend, a 16-year-old, charged with murdering another friend. I had to testify in the trial. I lost a friend in the process. It was an accident. I knew it was an accident, but they tried him as an adult and sent him to adult prison. And, it was a dumb mistake of a kid playing with a gun and screwing around. But it was not something where it was a mutual friend of ours. There was no dispute. And, it's hard to see. It's hard to see what the interim district attorney is doing because, I was maybe not the brightest kid. I was kind of mixed up in a few things and kind of running around with some kids that were a bit wild. But, I can say I could have ended up like that. And I know, and it's like you grow up and you become, you get some sense into your head, but you don't, young men especially, and these are all my friends were people of color, you feel like you're outside of society and mistakes are made, but your brain's not developed at that point. It's a science as much of a policy issue, right? We know this. We know that neurologically, young kids, especially young men, make bad mistakes. They make mistakes because they're not developed, because there's hormonal issues, because there's social pressures that they're not strong enough to stand up to, and criminalizing them instead of focusing on getting them help, I think is a mistake. I think there's accountability is important, but accountability can look a lot of different ways. It doesn't have to be about imprisoning somebody. It can be about helping a kid with counseling. I was fortunate enough to get counseling when I was 16 or 17, and that really helped me. But I think a lot of kids don't have that option. They don't have, parents that can afford that. And, luckily mine were able to. But, life might have been different for me. Life might have been different for a lot of kids if they had the right opportunities or didn't have the wrong situations that winds up in the school to prison pipeline. We had cops that were, they call them school resource officers now, but, having police there to criminalize kind of ordinary school misconduct, I think is really harmful to our youth. It creates divisions between the youth and, the police officers that are basically surveilling them in their schools. And, we take away somebody's childhood that way. So I fully believe in that people can change, people can grow up, people can be redeemed, people can be rehabilitated. And that's what our focus should be. It should be on ending the school to prison pipeline. It should be on giving kids a chance to succeed where I think historically we haven't.
Thank you so much for this interview, Mr. Hamasaki. That concludes the question period from the members, and thank you so much, members, for all your thoughtful, diverse questions. So Mr. Hamasaki, you have 1 minute to close. And again, thank you for adjusting your schedule today.
Absolutely. In closing, I think what the district attorney's office needs right now is strong leadership. It's not a job for a line prosecutor, it's a job for a leader. I have a long history of leadership, both at the Police Commission, as president of the Asian American Bar Association, the second largest Asian bar association in the country, the Barristers Club, one of the largest bar associations in the country. I've been selected by my peers in nearly every organization that I've been in to lead it, because I can work with everybody, I can get along with everybody, but I can also do the work and make sure the job gets done. I am ready to lead the district attorney's office of San Francisco. So I thank you very much for your time. This was a great discussion, and I would respectfully request the endorsement of the DCCC. Thank you. Did I get beat a minute that time? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Hamasaki, and have a wonderful day.
You too. Thanks for all the work you're doing. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Executive Director Garcia is our next candidate here.
She is not here. Her campaign manager is here, and she should be arriving shortly.
Okay. I would just like to, if anyone joined us late, to thank everyone today for coming. Thank you to the members for coming to this endorsement committee interview. Today, we are interviewing 3 candidates for the position of district attorney. The process is each candidate will have 2 minutes for an introduction, 15 minutes for member questions, and 1 minute for closing statement. I see that the DA is here, DA Jenkins. I don't know if you heard what I just said, but okay, you did. So we are going to start off. Matter of fact, Annabelle, if you want to make any clarifications, since you're going to be the timekeeper.
Yes. Thank you so much, DA Jenkins, for joining us for this interview today. Just to make sure that we're all clear in terms of the process, we are allowing for questions and answers for 15 minutes. As members are asking their questions, the clock will be stopped. So that way you will get 15 full minutes to answer the questions. If there are more questions from members in those 15 minutes, we will expand the time to ensure that everyone gets an opportunity to ask those questions and for you to be able to answer. The other thing we want to make sure that if you can, we're not going to keep time in terms of the amount of time that you have to answer your questions, but we want to make sure you're answering them precise and timely, around 2 minutes. If you go more, that's fine. We're not going to tell you to stop. I just want to make sure you know that the longer you answer the questions, the less time you have for for us to ask more questions. In our previous meeting, we did expanded because there was members who wanted to ask more questions. So we will do that again. I just wanted to make sure that everyone's clear and understands the process. So with that, we can go ahead and start. Member Barry?
All right, thank you, Co-Chair Ibanez. DA Jenkins, you have 2 minutes for your introduction, and you may begin as soon as you would like.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. As you know, I'm Brooke Jenkins. I became a prosecutor back in 2014, being hired by District Attorney George Gascon. And I really learned sort of what it meant to be a progressive prosecutor from DA Gascon. And one thing that I learned was that we do have to have that balance. We have to make sure that we are providing alternatives to incarceration for most of our offenders, that we have to be creative about what those alternatives are. And we have to make sure that we treat every single person that comes into this system as an individual and address their case on an individualized basis. And so that's really what I have tried to restore to the DA's office, is making sure that we have accountability, but helping the lawyers understand that accountability comes in so many different forms. I've handled everything from misdemeanors to general felonies like drug dealing, gun possession, burglary, as well as sexual assault cases and homicide cases. And so we know that for some of our offenders, those who rape, who commit child molestation, who murder, that there is generally a typical path for them, but that for many of our other offenders, we have to figure out what is the appropriate form of accountability for them. And so that is what I am pushing very hard, is that we restore accountability and that we make sure that we're doing it responsibly, that we're pushing the reforms that we need to continue to implement in a responsible fashion so that we still maintain a level of public safety. One thing that I've learned over the last 8 weeks or so since I took office is that the city is desperate for improvement. Everyone across the city has generally the same concerns and the same frustrations. And so it's just trying to figure out how we implement responsible change and responsible policies that will achieve what is accountability in our system, but also still promotes our San Francisco values of compassion and equity. And so that is what I stand for, and why I'm pursuing your support as district attorney.
Time's up. Thank you.
Thank you. So members, if you have a question for DA Jenkins, please type STAC in the chat. And first I see member Avalos.
Thank you. Good morning, DA Jenkins. It is the responsibility of the San Francisco District Attorney's Office to enforce local campaign finance and disclosure laws. What is your position on the appropriateness and legality of a politically interested individual, organization, or donor to arrange consulting work using C3 funds to ensure key C3 staffers can work as volunteers on electoral campaigns as they are supporting through the C3? What kind of reporting and record keeping should be shared to the public, and would your office require for C3 and C4 related activities to retain in order to demonstrate a firewall between these nonprofit paid work and related C4 campaign activity, volunteer activities with clear electoral goals? How will your office bring clarity so that the public can have confidence that there is a clear separation of these activities?
Yes, so we actually don't fully conduct those investigations. I am fully committed to ensuring that we have public integrity. We do have a public integrity unit in our office. And so that is something that I'm committed to, and making sure that we have, ethical officials in our city and leaders in our city. And so that is something that, of course, the work that we will continue to do. Again, if you're hinting at my personal situation, I've been very clear that the work that I was doing as a consultant was very different from my volunteer role for the recall campaign. And so that is something that I have been very clear about. I sat down and did a very extensive interview about it. And so, of course, we will continue our mission towards holding anyone in this city accountable that we need to, and that won't change under my administration.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, my question was about records and what the public has the right to know, and what kind of records would give the public confidence. And I would like to, if you could answer that, that would be great.
Well, I think there's, of course, a distinction. I was doing legal consulting work, and so there is an attorney-client privilege, and I think we have to make sure that we still follow all of the rules within our society that allow people to retain counsel, but also that we still promote transparency. And so when those are up against each other, we just have to figure out what is, how we facilitate that. But of course, if we start down a road of people feeling as though they can't hire consultants in the legal profession, that presents a different challenge. But it's trying to balance, what is what is appropriate in those situations. And so, of course, it's finding that balance.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think the public's right to know is actually should be a countervailing force, but I appreciate your response. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Member Avalos. Next, we have Vice Chair Galata.
Thank you, Co-Chair Berry. Thank you, DA Jenkins, for being here. I wanted to follow up on a question in your questionnaire regarding donations from police officers and law enforcement organizations like the Police Officers Association. I know you indicated that you have not accepted money from these entities in the past, but I wanted to ask about your current campaign, and will you publicly commit as the current DA of San Francisco to not take money from the POA and other law enforcement entities in this race? And also, as a follow-up to that question, as DA, will you hold law enforcement accountable, particularly police, in cases where there's clear evidence of officer misconduct or excessive force?
Yes, and thank you for your question. No, I will not be accepting donations from any law enforcement entity or agency. I don't think that's appropriate, and so it's not something that I will be doing at all. And I am committed to holding those who use excessive force or who commit police misconduct accountable. I actually promoted a different individual to the head of our Independent Investigations Bureau to make sure that we've got great leadership there, somebody who has extensive history as both a defense lawyer at the highest level, defending murder cases, but also has prosecution experience so that she's in a position to also assist in the trying of cases. I actually just did an interview yesterday, very disappointed about a case that when I took over, I immediately went and asked what the status of it was, which was 2 Alameda County sheriff's officers or sheriff's deputies who had brutally beaten a man in San Francisco that they chased over here across the bridge, only to find out that one was given diversion and another was given a misdemeanor. And I'm going to actually be opposing the expungement of the misdemeanor conviction, which they've already filed a motion for under the previous administration. So I am committed to holding them accountable in every single way.
Thank you. Next question is from Imran, who is the proxy for member Malia Cohen.
How are you, District Attorney Jenkins?
Hi, good. How are you?
Thank you for joining us today. So this past week, Dreamforce welcomed over 40,000 attendees to Moscone Center, which was the largest conference in San Francisco since the COVID-19 pandemic began, and frankly turned out to be a great success. So as San Francisco's economic recovery continues, may you speak to what visitors, both internationally and domestic, can expect when they visit the city, especially in regards to the downtown corridors?
Yes, and so the downtown corridor is certainly a significant area that we are trying to make improvements on. We understand as an office that we play a role, of course, in personal safety, but that our economy depends upon having an atmosphere of public safety so that people feel safe to come visit, right? And to hold these conventions, and also just to have people willing to come in and return to work downtown, which has been an immense struggle as I've gone around talking to business owners and business leaders who have offices downtown. And so we are committed to making sure that repeat offenders are held accountable, that we are working vigorously to correct the situation with the drug dealing downtown. We know, and I know from doing this work, that when you allow drug dealing to explode, what it does is it breeds addiction and it fuels it because people have such easy access to the drugs that they are addicted to. And then that desire, right, to feed that addiction, unfortunately, generally results in people committing significant thefts. We have people who have mental health problems that are also using. That's a dual diagnosis issue, so that the drugs then foster, right, some of the issues that they're dealing with mentally, and that promotes violence. Drug dealing alone begets violence, and so we have to be tackling that issue primarily in order to hope that it has a ripple effect on these other issues. And so that's why I released a number of policies regarding the prosecution of drug dealing cases to ensure that there's accountability again, that we're not allowing drug dealers to exploit and abuse our rehabilitation courts any longer, that there are penalties for those who are dealing near schools. We have so many schools in the downtown, or in the Tenderloin, et cetera. But I really believe that if we tackle that issue up front, that we'll see positive impacts in the other areas as well, because there won't be as many dealers for those dealing with substance abuse to be coming to, and then hopefully that will influence some of those who are struggling with addiction to get the help that they need, which will decrease the amount of theft and other things that are going on.
Thank you. And just so everyone knows, the order of questions will be Banas, Baraka, and Morales. So next we have Co-Chair Banas.
Thank you so much. I actually have a follow-up question in terms of what Member Avalos asked, and I feel like I need to ask this question because I'm a little confused by your answer. And you mentioned that you gave an interview with this, to talk about this issue. And I remember that interview was with the San Francisco Chronicle, in which you mentioned that you knew in advance that once you filed for financial disclosures from revealing payments you received while in the recall campaign against DA Chesa, you called yourself a volunteer, and that it would blow up into a huge controversy. And now you're calling yourself a consultant. Also, in that interview, you acknowledged you could have been more transparent about this during the recall. I'm wondering, why have you failed to be fully transparent? And it's been more than a month since that form was filed with the knowledge it would cause this great and ongoing controversy. And you also, I remember there was an event at Manny's event, and you said that you were not going to, that there was nothing to lose trust, and that you're being very honest. But if you are being very honest, then why not earn the trust with candor and full transparency?
Yes, and I understand your question. And what I said in that interview was that at the time that I was working, I saw them as two very, very different things, right? I'd never been in politics before. I was speaking out as a volunteer, which was something separate from the work that I was doing, and I viewed them as very separate. At the time that I filed the disclosure, understanding as things played out with the recall and how so much attention was given to Neighbors for a Better San Francisco, as well as Bill Obendorf, which was not the case when I first signed on as a consultant, certainly what I had learned over those last few months, where a lot of the spotlight was on that entity and that particular donor, that it was going to be something that certain people got upset about. And so, yes, I did my obligation, which was to disclose it. But at the time that I decided to consult, there wasn't as much attention on them. And so I didn't really see the two as connected, and saw them as very different, and didn't foresee that it would become what it has now. And of course, yes, if I could go back, I would, because rather than us talking about what I have done as district attorney for the last 8 weeks, we are still on this topic. And it is a distraction, in my view, from the work that I'm doing, which of course, I would rather not have. And so that's what I meant. As far as, like I said, the issue with, everybody wanting, certain documents and all those things. As I said, I'm not your average person. I wasn't a political consultant for them. I was a legal consultant. I am an attorney. And so I have a different obligation to legal clients that the average person wouldn't have, not being a lawyer. And so that is the difference.
I understand that. You're now defining that you were a legal consultant, but prior to that, all the interviews, even when you came to the DA to speak in support of the recall of Chesa Boudin, you said you were a volunteer. And there's a big difference between a volunteer and a legal consultant. A volunteer does not get paid. I mean, I've been volunteer for campaigns, and the most I get from volunteers, it's either coffee or donuts. And if we do live interviews, possibly pizza or salad. So there's a big difference between being a volunteer and stating when you're a volunteer versus a big difference that when you disclose this information to SF Ethics shows that you got paid. So there's a big difference. And that is what's concerning to the San Francisco residents, that you weren't honest. And we're trying to get from you the honesty. Maybe you did not understand the difference between volunteer and being a consultant.
So I think what I've said is that my role as a spokesperson for the campaign was volunteer work, which was separate from the other stuff that I was doing. I was not being paid by the campaign because I was a volunteer for the campaign, and there were two different things. And so that's the distinction that I have made. And so I'm not sure what more I can say to explain that they were two very separate things, me being willing to here and there do an interview or speak to a group of people, which was very different from the other work that I was doing.
Yeah, but I think it's important to also stay, especially when you're in the political light and such controversial issues, it's really important to say, I'm a volunteer on this area and a paid person. And that did not happen. It was, and it's still very unclear in my opinion.
Which is what I said at this point, right? I fully appreciate that issue, and I've acknowledged, and I'm acknowledging now that given what I have learned, I would have handled it differently.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Vice Chair Baraka.
Hello, DA Jenkins. I'd like to ask you I should say, give you the opportunity to address some of the yes or support or oppose questions that you weren't able to answer on your questionnaire. And particularly, I don't need to go over all of them, but the ones that I'm concerned about or would like to know your answer or why you chose not to answer. The questions are, do you support or oppose reparations? Will you commit to fully funding the San Francisco Public Financing Program? Do you support or oppose expanding rent control to post-79 buildings? Do you support or oppose charging children as an adult? And I wanted to find out what your new plan on the diversity, or I should say the racial equity plan. I thought that was pretty solid in what they were asking for with regard to the racial equity action plan. So what are your responses to those questions that you weren't able to answer?
Well, so for a couple of them, I tried to stay in my lane, which is criminal justice. And so I wasn't trying to embark on things that are not within my control, like rent control and reparations, because that's outside of my wheelhouse as the district attorney. But
you vote as a person, right? I mean,
wait, I'm sorry.
You vote as a person too, right? You go out the box. I mean, you have, views that I think inform your decision. So that's why why we ask some of these questions, not necessarily.
I can answer them now. I do support reparations. I do support rent control. I think of course, we all live in a city where it is insanely expensive, and it's almost impossible for a lot of people who work here even to be able to live here. So I certainly support that. Public financing, yes, I've always been in support of that, to allow candidates who aren't wealthy to be able to compete in the political realm. And so that's always been something that I've been in favor of. And I did not answer the charging children as adults question on that questionnaire because it was limited to a box that was yes or no. And I thought it's a very nuanced question that I have to be able to answer with more words than just a yes or a no. And so fundamentally, in respect to that, I believe that our children should be presumed fit for the juvenile system. And we begin with that presumption under my leadership in the DA's office. However, I did have a number of discussions with both faith-based leaders, other community members and stakeholders at CBOs and juvenile justice stakeholders as well, who I brought into the DA's office on a number of days to discuss what their thoughts were about juvenile justice, in particular this issue, what concerns I had, and shared with them sort of a preview of the policy that we were considering. This wasn't something that I wanted to do overnight. I wanted to make sure, or just with lawyers sitting at the table, I wanted to invite many, many people, certainly. And most of these people, quite frankly, were African-American, Latina, Pacific Islander, most of the people who are truly affected by this particular policy, to be at the table inside the DA's office and give me their feedback. And so at the end of it, we both adjusted and adapted some of the policy based on the feedback that we got, but I arrived at a policy that I think will promote fairness, but also public safety, which is they are presumed to be fit for the juvenile system. But for 16 and 17-year-olds, there are 29 crimes technically that make them eligible for the DA's office to seek a transfer petition to adult court. We didn't leave those 29 crimes on the table. I picked 5: murder and attempted murder, forced sexual assaults, torture, kidnapping, aggravated mayhem. Those are the only 5 charges that we will even consider if the situation is egregious and is a type that shocks the conscience, for us to activate what will be a juvenile review team. That juvenile review team is comprised of our chief of the juvenile division, Tiffany Sutton, somebody who I greatly trust based on her upbringing, personal experiences, as well as the footprint that she's had in the community in San Francisco with our youth, as well as who is now currently our chief of victim services, but not through the lens of that role. I wanted her on this team because she is somebody who has 20 years of experience in juvenile mental health and trauma-informed mental health work. And so I wanted somebody who was able to give us a viewpoint and a vantage point from what goes on in a minor's head at the time they're responding to some traumatic situation, how trauma in their lives informs the way that they respond to certain situations, so that we're taking that into account. The third member of that review team will be a chief of our criminal division. We have 2, depending on which crime type it is and which one they fall under. They will, when they activate, they'll review the entire case. They will meet with the minor's defense lawyer and take whatever mitigating information that lawyer wants to offer. I don't like to leave it just to lawyers, because not all defense lawyers are created equal, and I don't want anyone to be penalized if their lawyer doesn't do the homework that they need to. So allow the minor's family or anyone else who wants access to this team to give them whatever mitigating information that they would like, as well as the victim or victim's family. The team will also be able to gather information from whatever other sources that they think is appropriate to issue me a recommendation of what they think I should decide. Like I said, the criteria is that it has to be only in one of those 5 crime types. It has to be egregious. And quite frankly, the example that I have used time and time again as one is that we are now in a time where what used to be duck and cover drills for earthquakes is now active shooter drills in our schools, because we have had, right, since Columbine, a society where 16 and 17-year-olds go into classrooms of children and kill them. We have had cases in the past with brutal rapes and murders that were committed by 17-year-olds. And we have to be in a position to just at least be willing to engage in a discussion of whether or not the juvenile system is fit to rehabilitate some of these offenders, right? Because they have to be released by 24. That is the law. And so for some of these egregious situations, like if we were to have a mass shooting at a school, we have to figure out whether we think 24 is old enough, right? Is that enough time? Is that window of time enough to rehabilitate them? And so I didn't want to foreclose that conversation. I'm not allowed under the law to direct file adult charges against a 16 or 17-year-old. All I can do is authorize a petition.
I was just going to say that I wanted to move on because the time is limited. Moises, can you let us know how much more time we have?
Sure. There's 1 minute remaining for answers.
Chair Banyas, though, I just had just one quick follow-up to a question. I don't think the answer fully addressed what I asked, and the reason being is that I feel that all the people that you've mentioned to help guide your direction on how you're going to treat youth and charging, I didn't hear any of the science around their brain and their ability to make rational decisions at that age, and has any of the science informed your decision on whether or not that it's appropriate to charge a young adult? I didn't hear that represented in the panel that you used to inform your decisions.
Yes, of course, it's something that we have considered. And it's also, like I said, that's a part of the reason why I have a juvenile mental health expert on that team who can weigh in that regard.
Thank you.
Okay, so the order of the
Barry?
final questions will be Morales, myself, Lovett, and Maliga.
Member Barrett, since we have less than a minute and a half, I would like to make a motion to expand this interview, given that there's about 3 more or 4 more members.
Second.
So moved.
And so can I make the motion to expand it to 15 more minutes? And I'm gonna give my rationale, given that there's, I think, 4 people or 5 people who wanna be able to ask questions. I wanna make sure that every member has an opportunity to ask the questions. We gave candidate Hamasaki 10 minutes. There was two questions that were asked of him, and I wanna make sure that in terms of the time is fair, and I hope that this feels fair to all of you. I feel like it's important since we have 5 people actually on to ask questions.
As long as DA Jenkins is amenable, I'm fine with it.
Yes, that's fine.
Yeah.
So I guess my motion is to expand the interview to 15 more minutes.
So moved.
Co-Chair Abanez, I second your, or Vice Chair Brock, I second your motion.
Thank you. So let's do a vote. Those who are in favor to expand the interview for 15 more minutes, please say aye.
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 Those who are not, who are opposing, please say nay. Those who are abstaining, please say abstain. So motion carries. So we'll have 15 more minutes for the interview. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Treasurer Morales.
Thank you. Hi, good afternoon. Yay. I have a couple of questions that are related to transparency and justice. And I think, and I don't want to put words on member co-chair Ibanez's mouth, but what I picked up in her insistence in her question was around transparency and the kind of trust that many communities of color in general don't have already with law enforcement agencies, right? And so I'm wondering how we can address some of these matters. And one is around management and another one is around immigration, right? And I'm really happy to hear that, you'll be looking at cases in an individualized basis, but as you know very well, our communities of color that are disproportionately affected by the criminal justice system don't just work on an individualized basis, right? Like we both carry trauma of violence, but also poverty and systemic issues. So sometimes it's a little concerning for me to hear that, that most of the focus is on just reviewing individual cases rather than seeing, for example, as Vice Chair Baraka was mentioning, right, we have been seeing a wealth of evidence in the past few years in particular, and with the great, our great researcher, she's not Attorney General. I completely forgot what her position is, but she comes from doing research in the Bayview and talking about trauma and how, right, the brain of our young people doesn't fully develop until 25. So thinking about that and thinking about, for example, immigration and the great amount of unaccompanied minors that have been arriving to the United States, at least through the past 8 years in unprecedented levels, right? And that we see the young people that are being accused of selling drugs in the Tenderloin being mostly, the great majority, youth under 25, many of them under 18, who are immigrants, who do not speak English, who do not understand the system here, who have arrived on foot, crossing the desert, being able to survive that, to many times being told a story of what they'll be doing here, right? And then here we are, right, trapped in the systemic problems of the opioid crisis that's national, that is not just our city, right? That is not a problem of the 5 immigrants or 10 that are selling drugs in the TL, right? How are you truly looking at the nuance of what is going on in terms of the immigration crisis that we have of unaccompanied minors, of exploitation of our youth in San Francisco, and the problem that we also have around an opioid crisis that it's killing thousands of people, but that we should be learning about scapegoats, right? So that's one part of the question, because I've been concerned about some of your policies around how you're looking at this issue and kind of like throwing young immigrants under the bus. And I wouldn't want to repeat, right, the war on drugs. And the other question is around I love that you're a woman of color and that you have been bringing women of color into your office, but you have also let go of women of color leaders that have a very strong track record of reform in San Francisco, including me, without even having a conversation of what's the work that we're doing, not because I necessarily need to stay in that office, for example, but to be able to have continuity, right? To look beyond politics into what's really justice for a certain group of people. And Latinas in particular, the two Latinas with decision-making power in the office were fired. And so what are you going to do as a leader and as a manager to make sure that you're having the expertise inside of your office to address some of these issues around the Latino community, which is disproportionately represented in the jails, as is the Black community, right? It's the two communities that are most underrepresented in our San Francisco jails. And so I'm wondering how you're tackling these two issues.
So first, I want to say that we're also, Blacks and Latinos, disproportionately the largest population of our victims as well. And so that is something that I take very, very seriously, because we need advocacy from the DA's office for our victims. They shouldn't be left holding the bag saying, you know what? Oh well, you live in a certain neighborhood, crime happens, so now it's on you, right? And so I have an obligation as the district attorney to make sure that we advocate for our victims, who the majority of whom are people who come from poor Black and Latino neighborhoods. And so let me start with the beginning, which is I don't believe I've made any statements to even infer that I have any animus or anything towards our immigrant populations, that it's not something that I'm taking into consideration as the district attorney. Personally, the way that I grew up was with my single Black mom, because my dad was from El Salvador. They met while he was here on student visa. When it expired, he had to go back home. And so I didn't meet my dad till I was 21. In large part because he was not a citizen of the United States. So I very well personally understand the implications of immigration issues here in America. And it's something that I take seriously. And we have set policies and guidelines within our office to ensure that immigration status is something that's taken into account in the way that we make our offers. And with respect to our minors who are over here, and I know that even in our discussions with the San Francisco police, we are trying to figure out how to delicately address the number of our Honduran minors that are, found to be selling drugs. And we're making sure that we are putting them not through a criminal process, but through a process that helps them get into a stable place. I mean, the point is not to just toss a 16-year-old back out onto the street alone without a family, right? Because most of them are here alone, but trying to find them a home and somewhere to stay and those other things. And so it's a lot that we are internally discussing. It's at the top of mind for all of us. And I'm not a person who has ever operated in this system without compassion. That's the way that I've done this work for 8 years. I also want to say that when I say look at a case on an individualized basis, what I mean is we should be looking to assess somebody's particular circumstances. Do they have a criminal history or not? Do they have mitigating information for why they ended up in this situation or not? Everybody who shoots a gun, right, and doesn't kill somebody shouldn't just get the same penalty because it's the particular charge on their sheet. We have to look at what their particular situation is and whether or not they are somebody who we can reroute to an alternative to incarceration, or whether or not they are somebody who we need to incarcerate or do something else with. And so it doesn't mean, that's not to exclude that we take a 30,000 foot view as well, right? To see what the implications of our policies are, how they're working, whether or not we're capturing too many offenders of color and treating them disproportionately or what have you. But what I mean is I shouldn't just treat everybody blanketly the same based on their charge. I should look at who they are as a human being and what their circumstance is. And I will always maintain that that's something that we should do. With respect to how I made personnel decisions, every district attorney, every new leader, regardless of who you are, a new administration is entitled to make the decisions that they see necessary to proceed. That is what I did. The two highest ranking people in the DA's office right now are Latina, myself and my chief assistant, Ana Gonzalez. So to have somebody make it sound like that is not the case. Anna grew up in the Mission. She went to Mission High School. She's a San Francisco native. And so we take it, I think we reflect exactly what you're talking about. And we've tried to make impacts in this system that are more fair. And we've also tried to be very strong advocates for our victims that look like us and that come from the neighborhoods that people like us come from. And so that's the mission that I have, is to make sure that on both sides, right, that we see a total view of the impact of our work, both on our offenders and our victims and on the city as a whole.
Thank you. Next up is me, and then it will be Lovett and then Malika. I have a two-part question.
Okay.
DA Jenkins, on February 19th, 2022, you came to this body as the face of the recall campaign when we were under the impression that you were a volunteer. At that interview, I asked you if you wanted to be district attorney, and you said you explored running, but it was not for you and was not your motivation for resigning from the district attorney office and volunteering for the recall campaign that was heavily funded by right-wing Republicans. Voters have questions. You are the chief law enforcement officer in San Francisco and are held to a higher standard of ethics, which I've heard you even say, as well as honesty and trust. The San Francisco District Attorney's Office is responsible for restoring accountability and consequences to the criminal justice system in San Francisco. For transparency purposes, my question is, when did you receive your check from Mary Jung's organization? Had you communicated with Jay Chang, Mary Jung, Mayor Breed, William Obendorf, anyone at the Neighbors 501c3 or 501c4, with anyone at the Safer Without Boudin organization prior to leaving the San Francisco District Attorney's Office? The second part of my question is, it is my understanding is you moved here 9 months ago, around November 2021, 1 month after you quit your job at the district attorney's office. When was the first time the mayor mentioned to you the possibility that you may be a candidate for interim district attorney?
So yes. So what I will say is, I'll answer your last two questions. I'm not going to allow this interview to become a particular type of investigation of that particular matter. I have answered the questions that to the degree that I feel that is appropriate for this particular forum, but this isn't an investigative body. And so I'm not going to sit here and answer specific questions about timing and when I got a check and those types of things. What I will say is I didn't speak to the mayor about anything to do with becoming the DA until my first interview with her for the position. I had met her once. Or I met her once while I was in the DA's office when she came to speak to the Black prosecutors. And I met her once at an event out in public, literally shaking her hand and saying hello. And that is it. She and I had never had a conversation about it. My family moved here in October of 2021 because this is where we wanted to live. My husband's family is from here and my children were born here. And this is where we decided to raise our children. I was not planning to become the district attorney when I spoke to you the last time. When I explored running at the insistence actually of someone else in 2018, no, it was not the appropriate time or situation or place for me at that time. And I've maintained that since 2018.
Member Lovett.
Yes, hi, I'm DA Jenkins. Thank you very much for taking all this time.
Thank you.
I had a question with regard to your new policy about drug users and dealers, but I actually really want to circle to these issues because it is about the public trust to understand the path that has led us past the recall to the current situation with your role as the DA. So as SF Standard and also the Chronicle has pointed out, there is a web of organizations that are C3s, nonprofits that are supposed to do public political work, and then the C4s. So the questions that haven't been answered are with regard to your relationship with Mary Jung. And of course, she's been a long time head of the SF Realtors Association. From that role, she has helped to fund the Sister Circle and also this Global SF. And those are also nonprofits that you have had some monies paid to you from. And so how has she been able and how have you been able to keep your role separate? Because she is both your boss, since she's the CEO of the Sister Circle, that nonprofit, and then in your volunteer role for the Recall Chesa campaign, essentially, she's your boss as well, because she has been head of that. I can't wrap in my head how those are kept separate, even if they could be on paper, because there's conflicts of interest and also perceived conflicts of interest. And those are important in a court of law as well.
Yes. And so, like I said, my role for the campaign was simply to, when I was asked to speak somewhere, to go and speak. That was it. There was no work to it. It was literally, can you go explain answer people's questions? Can you do this interview about a specific topic that a reporter is writing about? That was the role. So it was very easy to keep it separate because it's not written. It's not reviewing anything. It's literally me just talking from my experience as a prosecutor for 7.5 years at that time. You make connections in many different ways, and that's how a lot of business relationships are built. I don't think this was anything different than that. What I will say is that I've been all over the city for the last 8 weeks, everywhere. I almost never get questions about this. It's once in a blue moon that I get a question about this. We've seen a recent poll that's come out that clearly states what my approval rating is and how people feel about me. So I don't know that these particular questions are at the top of mind of the average person in San Francisco who right now wants a safer city and felt displeased with the state of things for the last 2.5 years. And so I've tried to give you guys as much information that I think is appropriate for this forum to ease your concerns. But I will say that I don't believe that these concerns are shared by the majority of San Franciscans, because they have every opportunity. Everywhere I go, I say, ask me whatever you want. And I almost never get a question about this.
Thank you so much, Vice Chair Lovett. The last question will be from Member Malika.
Thank you, Chair Barry. How's it going, Brooks? Good to see you. Thanks for
Yeah.
coming out here and spending time with us and gracefully answering all these questions. I was appointed by the mayor also one time on the school board. And, my question to you is, as many times I used to tell people, she doing her thing, I'm doing my thing. People just don't get it, right? And so, but you are in a different spotlight, right? You are kind of like, this is the mayor's appointee to the, district attorney's office. How do you separate the two? And like, what's been that experience for you, and how do we convey to the public that you stand for the people and not for our mayor? That's one. And then my last question, you could fold it in however you want to see fit, is I've heard you say it all day today: public safety, public safety. I'm just curious to know, what is your definition of public safety, and how do you see public safety being played out here in San Francisco? So, but again, thank you.
Yeah, great questions. Thank you. Yeah, it is. It is an interesting situation that I didn't foresee, that so many people, I get these attacks, at least from my opponents, that I'm tied to the mayor, or I'm the mayor's puppet, or I'm in her pocket. She picked me because she trusted me to do the job, just like she picked you because she would have trusted you to do the job. She's not a law enforcement expert. She's never been a prosecutor or even an attorney. So in no way, shape, form, or fashion does she ever try to tell me how to do this job. We rarely see each other, quite frankly. I see her time to time at events or here and there. Like I said, that's about it. The most we've ever had a meeting about the work I'm doing is when we meet as a group with other people, meaning the chief, the sheriff, et cetera, law enforcement partners, to talk about the state of the city. But that's really it. And so I've tried to really emphasize that so that people understand we are two very different people. I'm sure you've sensed we both have some very strong personalities. And so, I'm really grateful for her to not try to be somebody who tells me exactly what to do, how to do it, when to do it. She has really just said, good luck. I want to get the city straight. And that's been it. And so I just continue to emphasize that as much as I can, and stay in my own lane, and she does her thing. The second question is about what public safety looks like or means to me. Look, I'm realistic, right? None of us think you can eradicate drug dealing completely in our society or in this city. Nobody thinks you can eliminate crime, and us never have burglaries or robberies ever happen. But what I think public safety means to most people is that it's not completely out of control, that we don't have a population of people that feel like they're being targeted because of what they look like, and people are just turning a blind eye to it and doing nothing about it. I went and spoke to as much as I've spoken to Asian seniors about what they're going through and what their fears are, and recognizing we're at an epidemic of them not feeling safe to walk out of their front doors and needing somebody to help implement, institute consequences for that. I was in the Bayview talking to Black seniors the other night, and let me tell you, they're just as scared, because they're like, look, there's shootings going on every single day, and I'm scared to walk out of my door because I don't know if I'm going to get caught in the crossfire. I don't know if these people who are using drugs out there are going to do something to me. We're at a point where our seniors around this city, regardless of what color they are, feel like they can't exit their homes, and that's not acceptable, right? They have to feel like somebody is trying to make the situation better, and for me that means, again, bringing back some accountability. We can't decriminalize the sale of drugs in San Francisco. That's not the right of the DA's office, but that's what has gone on. That doesn't mean war on drugs, put everybody in prison, but what it means is, hey, wake up call, you can't do this here. Right? And people who have 6 cases getting misdemeanors, that's not promoting public safety for the overall city. Also making sure, that for those who are attacking our Asian elders, that it's not that our victims come into court and find out that somebody got diversion and is out of custody for a brutal assault, right? Which is things that have happened in the past, but making sure, again, that we have appropriate accountability. If it's somebody with a mental health problem, then send them to behavioral health court, put them in inpatient treatment. If it's somebody who actually is hateful, then you probably will have a different consequence. But just making sure that we have a system of consequences, whatever it needs to look like for each individual person, so that people don't feel like the city is out of control, which is what most people feel.
We actually have one more question from Vice Chair Baraka, and then I promise no more.
Okay, yeah, because I have another engagement I got to get to. So
Okay, I promise this will be quick, DA Jenkins. The first question, actually, these can be actually yes or no if you'd like. Will you prosecute the officer that was found in a civil proceeding to have been responsible for the killing of Keita O'Neill? And the second question has to do with the recent decision from the Board of Supervisors to decriminalize something like psilocybin mushrooms. I think that certainly to me makes sense, and I wanted to get your opinion. So just Keita and psilocybin.
So the second answer is yes, I am for decriminalizing mushrooms. I've learned a lot about mushrooms, and I think it's along the same lines as marijuana, really, in the way that it affects you. And so I don't think we need to criminalize that. I can't talk to you about a specific case, but what I will say is that I am actively engaging in a review of that case, even myself. I've had the previous attorney that was handling it, breaking things down for me. And so I'm looking into all the cases that unit is handling. This one more closely, actually, but I can't. It would be inappropriate for me to discuss specific decisions or things about specific cases, regardless of what they are.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for those excellent questions, Vice Chair Baraka. DA, you have 1 minute for a closing statement, and this will be the conclusion of this interview.
Yes. And so what I will say is that, look, I know that we were on different sides of the recall when I spoke to this committee. My hope and desire is that we can move forward and work together in whatever ways that we need to develop solutions for this city. This city is desperate for solution-oriented work, right? And for me, there's lots of shades of blue in San Francisco. It doesn't matter what shade of blue you are. I think we've got to work together to advance the needs of the communities that are in San Francisco. And so I would just ask again that you give me the ability to talk to you about the way that I'm trying to do this work. I really don't think we're that far off in a lot of respects in the concerns that we have about prosecution. And I'm really trying to do, like I said, to promote an environment in our office where we're doing it the right way, which is in a balanced way that promotes equity, fairness, and proportional justice for everybody who's involved in this system.
Time's up.
Thank you.
Okay, well, again, thank you and enjoy your day.
Thank you. You too.
And this concludes the interview process for district attorney race. Again, Wednesday, we will be voting on endorsements for this race at 6:30 p.m. To the public, you may watch it on our Facebook Live, or you can dial in as a panelist through the Zoom, as a attendee through the Zoom. And also public comment will be available on this item as well as other items that can be found on the agenda on the San Francisco Democratic County Central Committee website. So unless anyone has anything else to say, matter of fact, Co-Chair Ibanez, do you have anything to say?
Just to say thank you to all the candidates that came and interviewed, and to all members of the audience that are listening to us, and all of our members of the DCCC that were here today, who took this morning and afternoon to do this important interview. I just want to say really thank you so much. And we'll see each other on Wednesday, March 28th at 6 p.m.
Thank you to Executive Director Garcia.
Yes, absolutely. Always.
Isn't it 30? Isn't it 6:30? Annabelle?
Did I say a different time? Yeah, 6:30.
Yeah, you said 6.
Oh, sorry, 6:30 p.m.
Thank you for your hard work on this. You too, Gloria, and Moise's excellent job today.
And yes, especially Moises being so good with the timing, and I know that's hard. asked him quite a few times where we're at because I didn't press my timer, and he's so on. Thank you, Moses, for making us always look great.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend.